Hey CMA buddies, let's today start with 9.6 of strategic management. Here we'll be talking about alternatives in strategic planning, right? There is a saying, or there are some scholars that who have advocated for an alternative view of strategy making. Advocated means that they canvas or they basically promote, because they are critical of formal planning model for three main reasons. As in, they don't agree with the formal planning model. Critical means basically disapproving of the traditional way. So what are these three reasons? The first reason is unpredictability of the real world, right? Secondly, it says the role that lower level managers can play in strategic management process. So they generally feel that the real world is not predictable, so you can't have a standardized policy. Then they also believe that the lower level management should be having a more say when you're talking about a strategic management process. And thirdly, they say that many strategies are often the result of serendipity, not rational strategizing. Serendipity means occurrence of events by chance in a happy way, or what we call as a fluke, right? So they feel that the formal planning maybe or formal strategic planning more or less is a fluke, and it is not a rational strategizing, right? So what some scholars say about alternative view of strategy making is that basically they are disapproving or critical of the formal planning because of three reasons. One is they believe the real world is unpredictable, so you cannot have a standardized format or rather a standardized system of strategic planning. The role that the lower managers play, rather, that is very pivotal when you talk about strategic management process. And thirdly, the strategies are often the result of serendipity. Serendipity simply means fluke, like by chance something good happens, so that is called as fluke, and it is not a part of a rational strategizing, right? Let's understand this with a simple little diagram. So when we talk about an alternative view of on strategy making, it is basically categorized into three parts. One is unpredictability of the real world, which examples of that can be technological changes or market volatility. Then you can also say that serendipity in strategy, that is fluke. This can be through informal networking or unexpected opportunities. And thirdly, you talk about the role of lower level managements. So they can be, examples can be grassroots insights or operational flexibility. Grassroots insight means knowledge coming from the lower part of the organization. Grassroots means the starting level, right? And operational flexibility means your ability to adapt to various operational exigencies or other operational performances, right? Okay, now what exactly is alternate view of strategic making, right? First we had to understand that why we need an alternative in strategic planning. Now we are looking at what are the various alternative, what is the alternative view of strategy making. There's something called as scenario planning. Okay, what do you mean by scenario planning? It involves formulating plans that are based on what if. So the question that you need to ask when you talk about scenario planning is what if, right? Scenarios about the future. So you need to ask the questions, what if this happens, what if that happens. So on that basis the scenario planning is based. Some scenarios may be optimistic. Optimistic means positive, and some may be pessimistic, or rather you can say negative. Team of managers are asked to develop specific strategies to cope with each scenario. So the managers which are there, they have to develop specific strategies, right? For what? To deal with the each kind of situation or the scenario that they have, right? So the first point that you really need to remember is what if. So that's what is scenario planning all about. A set of scenarios is chosen to track trends and identify the probability that any particular scenario is moving towards a specific direction. So once you do what if, and then there is a team who basically develops specific strategies. Out of all those strategies, what you do is you basically select a set of scenarios, right? For what? For tracking the trends. That is what is basically latest or what can attract basically a good result, fine. And you then identify the probability what that any particular scenario is moving towards a specific direction or not, right? Now idea is to allow managers to understand the dynamic and complex nature of their environment. So you need to understand, or rather basically the idea of doing all this scenario planning is the manager should be able to understand the ever changing, that is dynamic, and the complex, that is a complicated nature of the environment. For what? To think about problems in a strategic fashion. So they should be able to have a strategic view about each and every problem and generate various strategic options that might be pursued under different circumstances. So they should know what kind of problems basically appear or occur, and basically what kind of actions that they should rather take or pursue under different kind of situations that they have. right? This approach has spread rapidly among large companies. So this scenario planning is very popular among the larger companies, right? Let's understand this with a scenario, or rather a figure, a round diagram, more easier for you to remember. So scenario planning cycle simply says you basically formulate the scenarios, then you develop strategies, then you track trends, understanding the environment, and generate the options, right? So these 5 points summarize the entire concept of scenario planning, or you can say it's a scenario planning cycle. So what do you cover under formulate scenarios? When you say formulate scenarios, the one thing that you really need to mention is that what if. Fine. So if you are able to develop what if scenario to anticipate what the future events, then you develop the strategies. Then what is developing strategies? Creating specific strategies for each scenario. Then you track the trends. You monitor trends to assess scenarios probabilities. Then you understand the environment. You gain insights into the dynamic business environment, and finally you generate options. You identify the strategic options for various circumstances. So this entire para that has been given above has been beautifully explained in this diagram, right? Now we come to something called as decentralized planning, right? Now very important term that you need to understand when you talk about decentralized planning is something called as an ivory tower approach, right? What do you mean by ivory tower approach? Let's understand it in a simple way. Look at your left, the circle will define that. A way of thinking that is connected from practical concerns and everyday life. So any thought of thinking or a process of thinking which has no correlation with the practical concerns and the day-to-day life. So that is called as an ivory tower approach. That means you are disconnected from the normal thinking of what? Normal thinking of the practical concerns and everyday life is called as an ivory tower approach. So when you talk about ivory tower approach with respect to decentralized planning, what does it say? It says ivory tower approach can result in strategic plans where what happens? Top managers have little understanding or appreciation of current operating realities. So you can't be simply sitting at the top, ignoring the practical concerns and the everyday life, and you cannot simply make a decision by not understanding or appreciating the current operating realities. That means you have to have a look as to what is happening at the lower level or the grassroots level. Eventually, they may formulate strategies that do more harm than good. So this will be more harmful than doing any better thing for the organization. So that's what is ivory tower approach. So basically ivory tower approach is what that you need to mention in decentralized planning is that it can result in strategic plans where what happens, top managers have little understanding or appreciation. That means they have no understanding or they don't really appreciate the current operating realities. Eventually that what can happen, they may formulate strategies to do more harm than good because they are not close to the reality itself. Now what can you do to correct this ivory tower approach planning? It requires reorganizing of successful strategic planning encompassing managers at all levels of the corporation. So the basic idea to correct the ivory tower approach planning is basically you have to reorganize and you have to take the managers of all level into the consideration while you make the decisions or while you set up any guidelines or the rules, right? Now, much of the best planning should be done by the business and functional managers. So basically, it's not the top level managers who needs to do all these things. The best planning should basically be done by the business and the functional managers, those closest to the facts. So those who are working at the grassroots level. For example, if I take any kind of manufacturing companies, right? So the lower level managers who are monitoring the running of the machines, they are the ones who would be able to help you to take certain decisions or rather to plan properly because they are working at the grassroots. They exactly know what is the problems that they face, right? So similarly, you have to make sure that any kind of organization that there is there, you have to make sure that most of the business and functional managers are involved in the decision making. Why? Because they are the closest to the facts. Planning should be decentralized. So the idea of planning should basically not be centralized. Centralized means what? Only top level doing it. So you basically have to decentralize. That means you've got to delegate it and you have to involve everyone, especially the business and functional managers, for you to take the decisions at the corporate level. Fine. Then corporate level planners should facilitate business and functional managers to do the planning. So basically they should be acting as a facilitator, as in they should be working as a mediator between the organization and the company, and they should rather lay a platform wherein the business and functional managers can basically do the planning. This can be done by how? This can be done by setting the broad strategic goals of organization and providing resources necessary to identify the strategies that might be required for goal attainment. So how you can attain this is you can basically set broad strategic goals of the organization, and obviously you got to provide the resources which are very important for identifying the strategies that are required for the attainment of the or the objectives of the company goal, right? So how do you overcome? So the first thing that you really need to understand in decentralized planning is what exactly is an ivory tower approach. Then the second step is basically you got to explain that how do you correct all these measures of ivory tower approach, right? Just look at this figure, you would be able to understand it in a better way. How do you overcome the ivory tower approach in strategy planning? So the basic problem of ivory tower approach is ineffective strategic planning, right? So if you overlook, or rather if you correct all the points that are mentioned over here and here, you would be automatically able to make good decision, or you can basically decentralize the planning in an effective way. So what are these points? Inadequate managerial involvement. So you have to make sure all your business and the functional managers are basically involved. Limited role of business managers. So you have to ensure that your managers are more actively involved. Functional managers not engaged in planning. So functional managers should be given priority. Inadequate support to goal attainment. No, you have to give a platform to them so that they are able to attain the goals properly. Lack of resources of strategy development. Absolutely adverse of this you should do. You should basically provide them a good resource to attain the strategic development, and insufficient resource allocation. So you have to ensure that the resource is allocated properly. Similarly, if you look at the second part of it, lack of ground level insights, right? So that's what, if you make the decisions at a corporate level, then you will never be able to understand the ground level problems. Top managers detachment from the operations. So the role should be more oriented towards the business and the functional managers. Insufficient input from lower level managers. So you should make sure that all the information that is being required, that is coming from the core source, that is the lower level managers. Neglect of functional and business level strategies. So you have to make sure that the business and functional level managers strategies are basically included. Overemphasizes on corporate level planning. No, basically you just need to act as a facilitator, and the focus should not be on you. And centralized planning process, absolutely reverse of this. You have to make sure that the planning process is basically decentralized. So if you look at these points, you just reverse it, you automatically get the techniques to basically overcome the ivory tower approach, right? Okay, moving on. The process of generating, evaluating and selecting appropriate strategies is broadly referred to as strategy analysis and choice. So whenever you generate, evaluate and select appropriate strategies, that is called as strategy analysis and choice. Firm's current vision, mission and objectives plus firm strategy plus information gathered through environmental and internal analysis, that will be leading to a generation and evaluation of feasible alternative strategies. So three things are basically involved: firm's current vision, mission and objective. If you have not seen my last videos, please do check. There I have clearly explained what exactly is vision, mission and objectives. Plus, when you involve a firm strategy as well as the information gathered through environmental and internal analysis, this will lead to generation and evaluation of feasible alternative strategies. Fine. Okay. Please have a look at this. In small organizations, all decisions are made by the owner or CEO himself. Because the size of the company is small, so it's but obvious that the small organization, you would find the owner or the CEO basically making all kind of decisions. These involve what organization should do under alternative situations, what businesses should be added, which businesses to be divested, whether to integrate forward or backward, and other decision taken by the owner or CEO of the organization. So any kind of pivotal decision that needs to be taken by the organization, right? For example, what organization should do under various situation or alternative situations, what business should be added, that means where they need to invest or take over a business, or which one needs to be diluted or divested, and whether to integrate forward or backward. Every other decision is taken by the CEO of the organization, right? But when you talk about large and medium scale organization, following mechanisms may be employed for identifying strategic alternatives. The reason I've explained to you this is that in smaller organization, everything is done by the CEO, but that's not the case when you talk about medium and large organization. There are certain steps or there are certain mechanisms that needs to be followed for identifying the strategic alternatives. So what are they? So first one is brainstorming sessions, right? What do you mean by brainstorming session? In such sessions, top management and key executives, that means the top level management, generate a number of alternatives. So in brainstorming, the top management has a very vital role to play. At this stage, no importance is given to relative merits and demerits of the options. Fine. So importance is not primarily to the merits and demerits of the options that are given. In next stage, each alternative is reviewed and subjected to close scrutiny. So brainstorming session, you simply give the ideas, that's it. You don't basically analyze the merits and demerits of the option. That happens in the next stage, wherein you basically scrutinize the options that are there, fine. Alternatives that are appealing are further examined and analyzed. So based on the ideas in those brainstorming session, pass on to the next level, right? So that's what is brainstorming session all about. Then you talk about special meetings. Now please remember, such kind of meetings are basically held from their work, usually in a hotel. You would have seen many corporates generally tend to arrange certain meetings or special meetings once in a year or twice in a year in some kind of resort or some kind of hotels. Basically this is to make sure that there are certain special meetings conducted. So what is the purpose of the special meeting? This is to ensure that the process of thinking is not disturbed by interruptions during the course of deliberations. So they would go to some hill station or some kind of seashore, and they will have a hire a resort over there. Obviously they'll chill out there for some time, but their idea basically is to that there's no distraction over there and they are able to give more inputs, and these meetings can be very fruitful. Now participants suggest different alternatives along with the recommended courses of action. So it's not only the alternatives that they give, they also recommend the various course of actions that they can basically follow. Based on assumptions and future trends, each course of action is discussed and attempts are made to finalize the best option for further analysis. So idea is basically you do a lot of, this is also kind of brainstorming, just that you do it out of the routine hustle bustle of the life, right? So you basically go to some kind of resort or a seashore or basically hill station which is completely disconnected from a normal routine, and then you basically do a lot of brainstorming where you basically look at the various assumptions and the future trends, and each course of action is discussed and attempts are made to finalize the best options for further analysis, right? Then you even can hire outside consultants. Some organizations may hire outside consultants for generating alternative strategies, right? So you can basically hire specialized people for this. It is on the premise that outsider can observe the phenomena objectively and dispassionately. Because he's not the part of the organization, he won't be emotionally attached. So whatever premise or phenomena or rather any kind of alternatives that he comes up with, he would be very objective about it, and there will be no emotional connection, and he will bring his own expertise into the process. Outside viewpoint is expected to be new and fresh. So they basically can give you new ideas, because being in an organization, you tend to have a repetition in your nature. So if someone comes from the outside, it's but obvious that they will give you something new and fresh, and that may create many opportunities, right? So the first one is brainstorming session, second one is special meetings, third one is you can hire basically outside consultants. Then you can even have joint meetings. Now alternatives can also be generated by hiring services of a consultant and also associate some internal members in the process. So it's a culmination of both your outside consultants as well as the internal people that you have within the organization. This method has an advantage of blending new ideas by outside consultants with workable solutions from within the organization, right? So basically these mechanisms can be used for what? For identifying strategic alternatives. So you basically have 4 points. One is brainstorming sessions, special meetings, outside consultants, and joint meetings, right? Here basically in this diagram we have tried to describe what are the various alternatives. So which strategy generation method should be used? So either you can use brainstorming session, which talks about encourages diverse ideas without immediate evaluation. Then you can have special meetings that talks about provides an uninterrupted environment for in-depth discussion. You can even hire outside consultations, wherein it says offers fresh or objective perspectives. And joint meetings. Joint meetings, obviously it's a culmination of both your external and internal insights. That means you can have both outside consultants as well as the people from within the organization, right? Then we move to a topic which is called as a critical success factor, or what I define as CSF, right? Now what exactly is CSF? Product features that are particularly valued by a group of customers, and hence the areas where organization must excel to outperform competition. So every product has certain features, right? There are certain features which are basically valued by a particular group of customers, and hence the areas where organization must excel to outperform competition. Now for example, if I take a car company, say Maruti, right? Now basically Maruti is say for example is known for the quality of its cars, obviously. Now just imagine it's a new concept like power steering, right? So that only Maruti has launched. Just imagine to be that way. Then in that case, that's a feature that will be valued by a group of customers, right? So basically organization should make sure that they basically lay a lot of emphasis For what? For excelling in such kind of feature, so that they can outperform the other competition. So they have to make sure this power steering feature is the best in Maruti and not in any other car, because that is their USP, that is unique selling point, and they basically keep on excelling in it, so that their competitors are not able to take over their market share. Fine. Okay. Now, what are the various major sources of CSF? First one is the structure of the industry, right? Some CSFs are specific to the structure of the industry. For example, extent of service support expected by the customer, right? So basically the kind of support or service that you basically give makes you one of the most unique business proposition. I'm not trying to digress, but if you have not seen a movie called as Rocket Singh, Ranbir Kapoor, this one example basically can tell you how important a service can be in an organization. So if you have not checked it out, you may basically do that. That can give you a good idea of the service-oriented businesses one can have. Obviously, it's a movie, so it will be entertaining in nature, but at the same time, you can learn a lot of aspects when you talk about the the service part of an organization. For instance, automobile companies have to build a national network of service stations for ensuring service delivery to the customers. The simple example can be, for example, you're going on a highway, right, and suddenly your car breaks down, right? Now, you generally don't expect that there will be a service center for this. So, a company which has to really make its presence felt everywhere and anywhere, they basically have to have a service center in different part of the world, different part of the country rather, maybe the city periphery or even in the highways. So in that case, they have to have a good national network of service stations for ensuring what? For ensuring a good timely delivery to the customers, right? Then you talk about competitive strategy, industry position and geographic location. So three things. One is competitive strategy, industry position and geographic location. These factors, these factors mentioned also carry a lot of weightage with respect to CSF. Why? Because, for example, English-speaking manpower makes India an attractive location for outsourcing the BPO needs of American and British firms. Right? That's very, very true. So basically, if you have these CSF, that is competitive strategy, industry position and geographic location, they basically carry a lot of weightage when we talk about CSF. Example can be that of a BPO. Right? Then you have environmental factors. So the first one is structure of the industry. Now, structure of the industry is nothing but basically specific to the structure of the industry. That means the best example that can be of the car, wherein they have a national network of service centers throughout the country. Second one is competitive strategy, industry positions, and the geographic location. You basically can remember it as CIG, that is competitive strategy. C, I for industry position and geographic location. BPOs are the best example of it. Third one we talk about is environmental factors. So what exactly are the environmental factors? CSFs may also arise out of general or business environment of a firm, like deregulation of Indian industry. So CSF may come out of what? A general or a business environment of a firm. Example can be a deregulation of Indian industry. Example, with regulation of telecom industries, private companies had good opportunity of growth. So that is deregulation. Deregulation means not very concentrating. Government doesn't have a complete hold on it. They basically deregularize so that more private operators can come and basically try to improve that particular industry, right? Finally, you have something called as temporal factors. What do you mean by temporal factors? Temporal factors simply means some short-term organizational developments like loss of critical manpower or breakup of family-owned business may necessitate CSF. For example, there is a family feud within an organization. So temporal factors can make a difference. What basically are temporal factors or temporal dynamics? It is way a process, a system changes over time, right? So if there is any family feud, or if you have a family business wherein you don't have any fresh ideas, so bringing in new people can basically help you to develop the organization. Example can be an appointment of new CEO or rebuilding the company image. These CSFs are temporary till the objectives are achieved, right? Okay. Now, navigating critical success factors in a dynamic business landscape, what four things you need to remember? Industry structure, then environmental influences, strategic positioning, and the temporal dynamics, right? Now we come to the last part of the chapter, and this talks about the techniques of improving decision making. How do you improve what are the various techniques of improving decision making? One is devil's advocacy. Fine. What is devil's advocacy? It requires generation of plan and critical analysis of that plan. If you remember, there used to be a show called as Devil's Advocate. Karan Thapar, one of the most renowned journalists, used to come up with this show. So what exactly is a devil's advocate? They'll ask you very hard questions, right? And these can be very on the face, very brutal, very rude, but they can bring a lot of insights, right? So similarly, for improved decision making, you need to have a concept called as devil's advocacy. So here also you require a lot of requires a generation of plan and critical analysis of a plan. So someone may come up with plan, but there will be many people who will be countering it just to know as to how much that plan can be successful, and they can ask a lot of counter questions to the person who's proposing the plan. For example, one of the member of decision making group acts as devil's advocate, one who highlights all the reasons that make the proposal unacceptable. So I'm sitting there, you are proposing the plan, and I'm keep on criticizing it. I'm saying no, this is not possible, this is not possible. So the person who's proposing, he would try to persuade, or rather he would try to tell, no, there are better ways to go through it, and the plan I'm proposing, that can be basically implemented in a better way. So that's the idea behind it. This can guide decision makers to be aware of all possible disadvantages of recommended course of action. So if one person is basically proposing and the second one is basically trying to counter it, in that case they would be able to know all the pros and cons of a particular plan, right? That's what is called as devil's advocacy. Then the second one is called as dialectic inquiry. What do you mean by that? It requires generation of plan, that is a thesis, and a counter plan, that is antithesis. Fine. So you basically will tell what exactly are the benefits, and there will be again an antithesis. That means they will give a counter plan. They will say no, this plan is not better. Basically you can give they would rather suggest some other plan. The first one, in devil's advocacy, you propose a plan and there will be a lot of criticism about that. Whereas when we talk about dialectic inquiry, it says there will be a plan and there will be a counter plan, right? That reflect reasonable but conflicting courses of action. Strategic managers listen to a debate between, I'm sorry for the spelling of between, advocates of the plan and counter plan, and then decide which plan will lead to higher performance. I hope you understand the difference between the two, devil's advocacy and the dialectic inquiry, right? One is first one is you give a plan and you try to tell the disadvantages, or you are just critical of it. Whereas dialectic inquiry is one person give a plan and the second one gives a counter plan, right? So basically strategic managers basically listen to the debate of these two, and then you decide which plan to be selected. Purpose is to identify the problems, recommended course of action, and assumption of both the plans. As a result, managers are able to form a detailed conceptualization of the problem, which then becomes a final plan, a synthesis, that is called as a synthesis. So three words you need to remember is a thesis, antithesis, and then you come up with finally called as a synthesis. Dialectic inquiry can promote strategic thinking. So this plays a very important role when we talk about strategic thinking. Then you have something called as outside view. Outside view is very similar to what we did right now when we spoke about something called as outside consultants, when we are talking about identifying strategic alternatives, right? Similarly, you can have an outside view in this also. The techniques of improving decision making. Planners identify past strategic initiatives, determine whether those initiatives succeeded or failed, and evaluate the project at hand against those prior initiatives. So it's all based on the history. So planners basically identify what are the various strategic initiatives, determine whether those initiatives succeeded or failed, the previous one have succeeded or failed, and on the basis of that they evaluate the project at hand against those prior initiatives, right? Finally, you come with something called as a group thinking. Group thinking means everyone coming together and coming up with a plan. So this concept was basically introduced by a psychologist called as Irvin Janis, right? I'm sorry for the pronunciation. Irvin Janis, I don't know. It is IRVINGANIS, right? This occurs when a group of decision makers embark or start upon a course of action without questioning underlying assumptions. So basically they come up with a plan, and they also have to propose a course of action, and they won't question the underlying assumptions. A group unites around a person or a policy. So basically a group comes together and the entire idea revolves around a person or a policy. It ignores information that can be used to question the policy. So you basically don't question the policy. That's what it says. It doesn't question the underlying assumption. It rationalizes potential warning signs that should cause group members to question their beliefs, right? So basically they try to rationalize or mellow down. Mellow down means they just try to subdue the potential warning signs that should cause group members to question their beliefs. Commitment to mission or goals based on emotional rather than an objective assessment of the correct course of action. So it's more of an emotional thing rather than an objective assessment of correct course of action. Consequences can be poor decision because it is more emotional in nature. Groupthink can be a failure. So that is one of the drawbacks of having a groupthink, right? So what are the various techniques of improved decision making? Devil's advocacy, dialectic inquiry, outside view, and the groupthink. That's what it talks about, decision making techniques and their dynamics. It can be dialectic inquiry, devil's advocacy, that is plan generation and critical analysis. Dialectic inquiry, thesis creation, counter plan, or what you call it as antithesis, and debate and decision, that is the synthesis. Then you have outside view, it talks about the past initiatives, our success or failure evaluation, and finally you talk about groupthink. It basically assumption ignorance, and there is an emotional commitment. The only flaw of this can be it can lead to a poor decision making, right? With this we finish chapter 9 of strategic planning. So if you have not seen my previous videos, please make sure that you have a look. You can have a look at the diagrams also, because that would give you a good idea of what we are trying to learn, and basically that can help you memorize which are the concepts. So diagram that ways can help. That's why I've come up with these diagrams. Also, if you have not checked my videos on business data analytics, do check that. Basically, I've tried to cover all the topics in business data analytics. That's a part B of your FMBDA, that is Financial Management and Business Data Analytics, right? Thank you for joining, and keep learning. Soon we'll be coming up with the module 10 and the 11th one, and would try to finish strategic planning as early as possible, right? Thank you for joining, and happy learning.